Alright, today we are going to be looking at translating shapes and translating on a grid, on a coordinate grid, okay? Now translating is kind of a new word to you guys, but you probably have heard sliding before. So translating a shape is the same thing as to slide a shape. Alright, so let's try this. Let me draw a y-axis and an x-axis, and then I'm just going to draw, let's just do a triangle. Okay? We'll label this point A, point B, and point C. Alright, so we want to translate this shape. Let's translate it right 6 units and down 4 units. Okay, now sometimes it's kind of hard to translate the entire shape. A lot of us have a hard time seeing that. So what I like to teach people to do is just translate it 1 unit at a time, or 1 point at a time. Okay? So if I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to translate it or slide it 6 to the right and then 4 down, I'm just going to do it 1 point at a time. So I'm going to start with point B. Okay? And I'm going to count 6 to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to count 4 down. 1, 2, 3, 4 down. And there is my new B, which I'm going to label B prime, because it's my new one. Okay. Then I'm just going to take C and do the same thing. 6 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to count 4 down. 1, 2, 3, 4 down. And there's my new C. Then I'm going to do the same thing with A. Start here and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and there's my new A prime. Okay, and then I'm just going to connect them. And by translating each point, in the end, I've actually translated my shape 6 to the right and 4 down. Now, when translating, sometimes they're going to ask you for a rule for the translation. Okay? So the rule is, how do you move it in the X direction and how do you move it in the Y direction? Whenever you're going right or left, okay, so right or left, you're moving in the X direction. Okay? Whenever you're going up or down, you're moving in the Y direction. Okay? So if I look at this one, if in the X direction, I went right 6. Well, what does that mean? That means I took my X's, and if I'm going to the right, I'm going in a positive way, I added 6 to all of my X's. And then I went down, so that's my Y. I went down 4 units. Down is going in the negative direction, so I actually subtracted 4 from all of my Y's. This would be the rule that matches the translation. Okay, that's the rule. How does this help us? Well, let's say that we didn't have a grid to translate, so we couldn't come up with the new shape. We just had plain paper, so we weren't able to actually draw it out and count it. How would we do this? Well, let's look at what these points actually were. Our initial A was point 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5, comma, positive 2. Our initial B was negative 2, comma, 4. Our initial C was, let's see, negative 2, comma, 2. Alright, so now, if we were to follow right 6, so plus 6 in my X direction, and down 4, so minus 4 with my Y's, I could get all of my new points using this rule without ever having to graph it. For example, what do I want to do to all of my x's? I want to add 6. So plus 6, plus 6, plus 6. Well, a negative 5 plus 6 is 1. A negative 2 plus 6 is 4. And a negative 2 plus 6 again is 4. So there's where my new points would be. And if you look, the x for A is 1, the x for B is 4, and the x for C is 4. So that's correct. Now, what am I going to do with my y's? Well, I went down, so I'm going to minus 4, minus 4, minus 4. 2 minus 4 is a negative 2. 4 minus 4 is 0. And 2 minus 4 is a negative 2. Now let's check to make sure this is right. 1, negative 2, that's where my A is. Good. 4, comma 0, that's where my new B was. And 4, comma negative 2, that's where my new C was. So if you ever get to a position where you don't have access to graph paper and you can't graph it, just come up with a rule based on what they tell you, and then you will be able to get your new points. Okay. That is all that I have for translation. Please try one on your own using the Google form.